Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar of the Great Lakes Biochar Network. We are excited to have you all here. We're going to wait a few minutes as people start trickling in. I see the participants number going up there. In the meanwhile, while we're waiting to officially start, if you want to check out the chat function, that should probably be at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that, you'll be able to enter into the chat information. We're trying to keep this as informal and imagining we're in person as much as possible. So your ability to introduce yourself to the other participants in the webinar, if you want to just put in your name, where you're from, and briefly how you're involved in biochar. So putting some of our information, us as panelists, into the chat now as just an example. So if you want to go ahead and do that, go ahead and introduce yourselves, and we'll just wait a few more minutes to really get started while other people are coming on. All right, welcome everybody. I see some people entering in their information. It is great to have everyone. We have 37 participants right now. We had over 100 people sign up. So we're excited to be getting the word out to people. Engagements with the information about the webinars were over 1,000. So we're hoping that this is just going to continue to grow. So again, if you're just coming on, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, with just information of your name, where you're from, and how you're involved in biochar right now. A little bit of housekeeping. For one thing, I'm Dr. Brooke Comer. My information there in the chat, the new program coordinator of the Great Lakes Biochar Network. And so the chat is here primarily for participants to be able to communicate with one another. So you can post anything into the chat. And we're especially going to actually invite the opportunity for you to communicate and post into the chat for specific things like types of materials that might be helpful to you to come out of the Great Lakes Biochar Network throughout the presentation. But feel free to communicate with other participants on there as well. And we'll also have a question and answer forum. So that's where you can post questions that are directly to us as panelists that you would like to have us answer and have it then be discussed. So the types of questions that we're anticipating are ones that are primarily focused on the network and what the network can be, as opposed to kind of really specifics of, I have this garden plot and I want to grow tomatoes, how much biochar should I put in? Anything can be put into the Q&A forum. I just want to say that not everything might get addressed if it's not kind of specifically related to the content of this webinar, but feel free to post anything into that because it can go on to inform, for instance, when we have a frequently asked questions part of our website. So just mostly try to direct those towards us as the panelist and what the Great Lakes Biochar Network is and how it can best work for you as we are going through. And you can post those questions as we're presenting, and we're going to be getting to those questions at the end of the main part of the presentation. So please keep those coming. And again, if you're joining, if you want to introduce yourselves in the chat, and we're going to get going here in just a second. I'm Dr. Comer, or Brooke, the program coordinator of the Great Lakes Biochar Network, the one that's probably been sending you emails recently. So glad to have you here, and co-presenting this first webinar with Dr. Jessica Meisel, who can introduce herself. That's going to be kicking off the start of the webinar here.
Great, welcome everybody. I see the participant number climbing, and we're so excited to have you join us today for our first webinar in our of our new Great Lakes Biochar Network. There's a couple more coming up this fall. I'm an associate professor at Michigan State University, housed primarily in the Department of Plant, Soil, and Microbial Sciences with a joint appointment in forestry. So my research really is focused on understanding how pyrogenic carbon from wildfires or forest fires and how biochar as a soil amendment influences soil carbon and soil nutrients. And we want to acknowledge here our supporters. First of all, so this inaugural network has been supported by MSU Project Green, as well as by funding from the Michigan Department of Natural Resources through a landscape scale restoration grant in 2019. We're also supported by Michigan State University Extension. However, I'll say now and throughout the webinar that this is the start of a network. So we as a team at Michigan State University have launched the network, but the network will really be powered by and made up by people and organizations across our region. So I want to emphasize that we are here to help connect participants and stakeholders from across the region. And that's really will embody the network. It's not currently housed at Michigan State University, but is not an MSU exclusive program. Our goal is to serve our entire region and all interests regarding biochar. So before I get started, I'm also going to ask one more person to introduce himself. This is Charles Gould, and many of you may be familiar with him through his work in MSU Extension, and he's been a strong supporter of our biochar work so far. So Charles, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Jessica. This is a red letter day. I became interested in biochar several years ago and ended up, because of that interest and partly because I thought biochar was foo-foo dust, I ended up going to a conference in Oregon and had an epiphany while I was there, and have really tried to throw my support behind the education of biochar and dispelling some of the myths that I found that I believed in that are not true. So I'm excited to be part of this endeavor. My responsibility is to work with Michigan farmers across the state to help them with make good renewable energy decisions, and this effort is a way that I can, help farmers improve soil health and vitality and increase crop production where biochar fits in those cropping systems.
Great, thank you, Charles. I'm going to move on to our next slide here. Maybe, there we go. I just want to acknowledge that our notice of non-discrimination, again, part of this funding for the network or starting the network was provided by the USDA USDA Forest Service 2019 Landscape Scale Restoration Grant to the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, who's been a supporter of our project. MSU, Michigan DNR, and the USDA, we are all equal opportunity providers, and we're prohibited from discriminating on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, or disability. And our goal is to record this webinar, post it on our website, which will provide that link later on in the webinar, and also provide an ADA compliant PDF slide. If there's any other potential or suggestions you have for how to make our materials more inclusive, more accessible, please contact Brooke to communicate those requests and suggestions. Okay, so we're going to start off with a little bit of biochar basics. And I'm going to start with the traditional perspective of biochar, which is it's a carbon-rich solid material. You can think about it in terms of charcoal-like substances. It's thermally decomposed. And that means that it's biomass of many different types or of any type that is heated without oxygen present. If oxygen is present, you tend to get flames and combustion, but this is pyrolysis, which is the breaking of chemical bonds by heat or charring the material. The technical definition of biochar is that it is a material, pyrolyzed material that is produced with the intent to be applied to soil as a management practice. as a management practice for the purpose of improving soil productivity, improving soil carbon storage. It can also help filter soil water. There are many different benefits that have been shown from biochar. We'll touch a little bit on some of the cautions to keep in mind. One of the unique aspects of biochar is that it is scalable production technology, meaning there's biochar that can be produced and for the purpose of applying to soil, whether it is from a small scale single burner stove up to an industrial scale process. So this is one of the advantages, is it's scalable, which means it's accessible across a variety of interest areas. Our understanding of how biochar influences soil properties really began with research in the Amazon. So our understanding of biochar is relatively recent, but it's important to keep in mind that this is not really a recent technology. This is actually a very ancient technology. And research on biochar really began in these Amazon dark earths or terra preta soils. These are anthrosols, which means they are soils that are characterized by strong human influence. In the Amazon, the age estimates for these soils ranges from 1,000 to 9,000 years ago. And in addition to having very high charcoal content, these soils are also very productive. You've probably seen this photo in many different presentations. This is very widely used to show what a typical low productivity tropical soil looks like on the left and the crops that are produced in this area versus a nearby area that is an anthrosol or a terra preta soil. You can see this very dark color, which indicates high charcoal, high carbon content, high nutrient content, and that's really reflected in this very strong above ground plant growth. So in fact, up to 35% of carbon in these soils has been attributed to charcoal carbon. And most tropical soils lose productivity very quickly after they begin being cultivated. And that's not the case with these terra preta soils. They have sustained productivity. But, and this is a relatively new area that I have learned about, is that there's evidence that cultures in North America also used a similar process. And I want to highlight here, I'll put in the chat later on a link to a virtual conference that the College of the Menominee Nation hosted recently, which shows evidence of charcoal amendments being used in ancient gardens in northern Wisconsin. So this was a potentially widespread ancient use that can actually be used to help inform our efforts today to move towards a more sustainable future. And the technology we have available today really expands opportunities for biochar and its co-products. So this technology includes pyrolysis, which I mentioned earlier, as well as gasification. And our next webinar's presenter, Chris Saffron, will be talking about the production processes involved with biochar in next month's webinar. So this figure here is showing a pyrolysis plant, but just keep in mind there's a couple different variations of thermal decomposition that can lead to biochar and its co-products. Essentially, we can take almost any type of biochar, thermally decompose it, heat it without oxygen or without much oxygen, and produce liquid, gas, and solid product. The conditions of the production facility can be optimized to either prioritize the liquid, the gas, or the solid product. So in general, about half of the biomass carbon from this source material or feedstock material is converted into gas and liquid products. And this can be used for heat, for energy, for industry, for transportation. The other half of carbon in the biomass is stabilized as charcoal carbon. And this is important because carbon participates in a cycle, which means that carbon in biomass is sequestered into biomass through photosynthesis. And as that biomass dies and decomposes, that carbon is slowly released back to the atmosphere. So this process is shown in the carbon cycle diagram here. But by introducing pyrolysis into this process, we can actually stabilize some component of that carbon. So instead of allowing all the biomass carbon to cycle back to the atmosphere, approximately 50% can be stabilized or taken out of the cycle as biochar, meaning only half of the original biomass carbon is released to go back to the atmosphere. And much of that can pass through this gaseous or liquid products also. So this is why you may hear biochar being described as a climate change mitigation strategy. And this is because it helps keep some carbon out of the atmosphere instead of cycling back the atmosphere. And then the other connection I want to make here with Charles's expertise is that this connection between bioenergy systems and biochar as a byproduct or co-product is one of the reasons that there's been so much interest in biochar, because there's potential to fine-tune these bioenergy systems to help decrease our reliance on fossil fuels while also producing a product that has potential agricultural and other value. And so this brings us to this overarching question of how can biochar contribute to a sustainable bioeconomy? And there have been more and more initiatives and interests growing across our region about the bioeconomy. And this figure illustrates the many potential types of industries that can benefit from biochar technologies. So also biochar technologies, meaning those that produce biochar as well as its co-products, the syngas and the bio oils. So this suite of products can lead to benefits for the environment, for bioenergy, and for the economy. And this is where a bio-based economy becomes more important. So these applications can range from agriculture, which is what tends to be talked about most with biochar, treating it as a soil amendment, but it's also used in livestock feed as a feed supplement. It can be used for environmental remediation or as a component of packaging and building materials. So with all of these diverse interest areas, there are still many unanswered questions around each of them because we don't have much information about what's the best biochar to use, how to produce it most effectively, what are its short and long-term effects, what are its potential negative effects. So to help answer these questions, there have been a number of different regional, national, and international initiatives to help connect different partners involved with biochar and to help inform our understanding of the different types of considerations we need to keep in mind if we are going to be producing and using biochar. So some of the major players here are the International Biochar Initiative and the US Biochar Initiative. These organizations list a directory of regional groups, such as the Illinois Biochar Group, Great Plains Biochar Ontario, Eastern Biochar. And this number has been growing over the past several years. And so today, we, as the Great Lakes Bioenergy Network, Great Lakes Biochar Network, are joining this list. And our goal is to really focus on the unique opportunities and address the unique challenges that exist within the Great Lakes region. So there are many things that make our region unique in terms of its potential to expand opportunities for biochar. I'm going to talk about a few that I see, but I'm also going to invite you in the chat to post in the opportunities or challenges that you see as being unique to our region, the Great Lakes region. First, I want to identify 52.7 million acres of forest land, only tallying that total across the 3 Great Lakes states, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin. I should say 3 primary Great Lakes states because, of course, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, they're also part of our region, as well as Ontario. So this is a lot of forest acreage, even just hailing from a portion of our region. We also have a wide range of agricultural industries, both plant and animal-based industries, and sandy soils. And that's important because we know from research that sandy, nutrient-poor, acidic soils tend to be the soils that benefit the most from biochar. Of course, we have many other soil types, including very, very productive soils, but sandy soils we know are those that tend to benefit the most. We also have 20% of the world's surface freshwater in our region. This is important from an environmental perspective because we know that biochar can help decrease point and non-point source pollution. And that's part of the appreciation that many of us have for outdoor recreation and the environment in this region. And that appreciation has really become more clear during this COVID era, as getting out to enjoy the outdoors was one of the few things that was accessible to people during various levels of lockdown. So there's been a discovery or a rediscovery of the value of our natural environment. And then finally, I want to emphasize this growing interest in urban agriculture and urban forestry. Again, presenting unique opportunities to combine waste biomass from urban areas to biochar production to help address environmental and agricultural concerns. So over the past few years, several of us at Michigan State University have been working to understand biochar and its effects on the environment from a variety of different disciplines: soil ecology and soil health, to plant pathology, biofuels engineering, environmental contamination, forest economics, and human dimensions. And over the past, and fungal ecology here with Greg Benito, and then our new coordinator here, Brooke Comer, who you just met and will be presenting for the second half of today's webinar. But one of the things our team has noticed is a steady increase in the number and the variety of inquiries that we're getting about biochar. And that to us shows an increase in awareness about biochar and an increase in the variety of types of industries that are interested in biochar. And that includes agriculture, manufacturing, wastewater treatment facilities, bioenergy providers, the forest biomass industry, and people interested in economic vitality around our region. But I also want to emphasize we are very aware that there are researchers and practitioners working across our region. So again, our team has started this network, but it's really to host this increase in connection and partnership from a variety of stakeholders and practitioners, producers, and end users across our region. So this stage one with today's webinar is really launching the Great Lakes Biochar Network. And I'm going to turn this over to Brooke Comer, who will talk about our stage two, which is really how our current plans will grow the network and include your involvement and participation and input to help guide longer term network activities.
Thank
And
you.
I'm going to stop sharing here.
All right. Thanks so much, Jessica. Hopefully everyone sees my screen now. So going from stage one of establishing the network, as Jessica said, though, it's just the launch now. So we're culminating at the official launch, and we're excited to have everyone here because it's all about growing the network. So informing and connecting everyone and being able to look across all of these different sectors. Success in establishing and growing a network depends on creating and strengthening the partnerships across the region. So this includes public and private organizations, industries and individuals, colleges and universities, other institutions, all of them working across all of these dimensions shown in this slide and more. So we invite your participation as we begin to work on growing the network through our stage two work here. And notice that I said begin, just emphasizing that, we've planned initial steps, but our longer term activities are going to be directed by the needs and the request of the network. So your participation will be important for shaping the network and our future directions. If I can advance my slides. So one of our first goals and activities is the establishment of the Biochar Information Resource Center. So the first step there is we've launched the website. Here's a screenshot from the GLBN website. So this is what it will look like if you log on. You can see the web address there at the bottom of the screen. This is currently a work in progress, so there will be more tabs with additional information coming that you'll be able to access from across the top. And this is one of the main areas where we will be posting information and really connecting with people. Right now, there's just the events, but be checking back. There's going to be a frequently asked questions tab, largely populated based on what folks are saying that they do want to know, and the questions that we are seeing come up particularly frequently. So this is the top of the site here. You can see this would be kind of, if you're scrolling down, a screenshot of the bottom of the section of the homepage of the website. So, there's information, articles, publications, and people that are involved. And at the moment, just people that are at MSU, but as we grow the network, there'll be more information on others and other institutions in the area as well. And if people that weren't able to join us today that are interested, please encourage them to join the other webinars. And this webinar is being recorded and it is going to be posted online for people to view later. And you can access that through the website once we get that up. And you see this also, there is a quick survey, and trying to start by knowing who all is out there and who is interested and in what ways you're involved in biochar. So if you haven't already, if you do want to go onto the website, I think Jessica is going to post the web address there in the chat if you haven't been on our website yet. So maybe after the webinar, if you want to go on there and do that, so that will help gauge who's involved and help us as we move forward in growing the network. And also in the era that we are, also you can find us on social media. So, like us or follow us, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. It'll be other ways that we'll be able to get information out to people, letting you know that there's updates on the website, or also sharing other things that have been being put out there in regards to biochar. And it's also a means of other people being able to connect in the region. So our presence in these platforms is likely to evolve over time. So for now, expect more the promotion of the events like these webinars, also maybe relevant articles and news stories that relate to biochar. And it might be a means of being able to spotlight what other biochar practitioners in the region are doing with biochar, and for stakeholders to communicate with one another. So as new extension publications and articles come out, then summaries that can let people know of the current status of the science, and eventually the means of people being able to communicate will be via these social media and the website, both, as our first goal of this information resource hub. And why is all this important? Why are we all here? And the growing interest that we have seen, and why the network was created. So the idea that biochar can help support a sustainable bioeconomy. Bioeconomy maybe being a newer term to some. It's the idea of a production of renewable biological resources and the conversion of the resources into and waste streams, what would be a waste stream, into the value added products, so such as food, feed, and bio-based products and bioenergy. And biochar is really at the culmination of all of these. So all those circles there in our Venn diagram of things that are hot topics in the news that are affecting everyone's everyday life. climate and environmental benefits. As we talk about climate change more and more, the potential for carbon to be stored in the soil with biochar is a major aspect that can also improve water quality, linking this back to the importance of the Great Lakes region that Jessica mentioned, with 20% of the world's fresh water and the love of recreational areas in the area. So, and remediation of degraded land within urban agriculture. With biochar, you can increase soil moisture content, improve drainage as well. They seem almost counterintuitive that it can do both, but it can potentially increasing soil fertility and crop productivity. All of these different aspects that make it a really robust part of the bioeconomy, and why we see this growth in biochar. So there's many people that might be involved on the different aspects of the biochar bioeconomy. And even if you are in the same category, such as a producer of biochar, it might be that you're at very different scales. So part of the allure to biochar is that it's scalable and can be simple or high tech. And I know some farmers that some people, they might just have biomass on their own land that they want to turn into biochar themselves and use on their own land, versus other people that might want to scale up and have it at much larger volumes and for distribution and marketing, and looking to collect biomass from other stakeholders, for example. So biochar is many things, and it can be simple to high tech, and we welcome anyone who wants to be involved, no matter your size and scale, as we figure out who is in this network ultimately, and what your needs are. There we go. So this idea here, in terms of kind of a circular economy of inputs become outputs. So on the left here, you see about the agricultural residues and also biomass crops and agroforestry, all of these types of biomass that can be pyrolyzed into making biochar and other outputs also. So at those different scales, it might also be that you're a farmer, so you have agronomic, what would be waste products, or within agroforestry, or you're growing biomass crops. All of these things that are removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere via photosynthesis, and the parts that are not going to be used otherwise can be pyrolyzed, the outputs. And this was captured in one of the slides that Jessica showed as well, that you have bio-oil and syngas, and also the process heat, and all of these can go towards the energy production. And it really depends on what you're trying to maximize. Sometimes in the past, as we're looking more at biofuels, biochar has been more of the byproduct. And we're looking at making it more of what you actually want of that value added product. And you can try to maximize the pyrolysis process in order to get more of the solid biochar as a soil amendment, or you can try to maximize some of the other outputs. But altogether, it's creating this circular economy of capturing carbon dioxide, and as much as we can, trying to store the solid fraction of biochar in the soil. So thinking about the other side there, talks about biochar as a soil amendment. And Jessica mentioned it really depends largely on what types of soil that you might have. And this is part of some of the confusion that I think has been echoed by people as they've reached out to folks at MSU and other researchers of, how is this going to work on my soil? I've heard great things, and I've maybe heard negative things, but largely it depends on what you're starting with, and that we really do need more research and need to have more regionally specific relevant information. And here, the graphs here talking about on the left, how pH of the initial starting pH of soil might affect things, and the lower the pH, the more benefits you're going to be seeing. So along that axis, it's that change in crop productivity in terms of percent change. So anything to the right of that red line is increasing crop productivity with addition of biochar. And you see that's especially true for those lower pH soils. And on the right, that graph there, talking about soil textures. And although it has had positive effects in all types of soil textures, in particular, sandy soils, which are so prevalent in our Great Lakes region, have observed a lot of benefit in different trials that have been run in the past. So making it particularly good for our region. But there's other end uses of biochar. Mentioned already, it can be used as a livestock feed. It seems kind of an interesting aspect there, but in terms of global warming, it's been shown to even reduce methane emissions from livestock and can increase the gain of biomass in livestock. Use as a soilless media, that was actually part of my research, that and using biochar as a compost feedstock. So there is peat moss that's harvested. It's another non-renewable, basically non-renewable resource that has been being depleted and has some negative effects in regards to climate change and others. And there is a large industry around horticulture, especially that uses containerized growing and soilless media. And this could be a substitute. As well for green roofs is another example where biochar could have a lot of positive impacts on horticulture and that industry. And within compost feedstocks, that ability of biochar to retain nutrients and retain moisture, it would be able to help that industry and create an even higher value product that has really been gaining a lot of traction in the market. And with anaerobic digesters, both you have often a solid material, the anaerobic digester, solid effluent coming out. That's possible as a biochar feedstock. It's a large amount of biomass, and if it is charred, then it can be able to be stored more long-term and with all those nutrients as well, or put back into an anaerobic digester system in order to help stabilize that process within the digester. So there's a lot of research associated with all of these different end uses and trying to boil it all down and disseminate the information out to people that are interested, that want to be the end users or the producers of biochar. So thinking within that of what are all the stages and who are all the stakeholders. So you have the biomass procuring, so harvest of your biomass, the transport and stockpiling, for example. Then you go into more the manufacturing, so the pyrolysis effects and the products that you get, into distribution and logistics, packaging, transport and storage, and eventually on to the application outlook. So some of the aspects I just mentioned for soil, for remediation possibly, other aspects that aren't even necessarily based in agriculture, feed for livestock, other aspects. So this is talking about the life cycle analysis. And again, that idea of circular economy, that you produce biomass that can produce the char, which then can go back into the soil and increase productivity to produce more biomass, and ultimately pulling some of that carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and being able to store it in the soil where it can help be productive. So that is kind of the idea of thinking about the stakeholders, and coming into that, thinking about all of you and who is here with us today and why you are here with us today. Jessica, could you launch that poll for me? We have a quick little poll just to see who is involved with biochar and how. So if you can read all of those choices there. If you're able to just go through and select which ways you're involved in biochar, we'll give this a minute or two. You can select more than one. If you, for instance, make your own biochar and you use it, you can select both of those options. And this can be for people that are both currently involved with biochar. You can answer that first question if it's just what you imagine your role being in this biochar bioeconomy in the future. So please, everyone, try to answer that first question. And then that second question there is, are you currently involved with biochar? So if you're already doing these things, select yes for that. If you're not, you just have hopes for the future that you will end up being involved, then answer no for that second question. But let us know how you see yourself being involved in the biochar network. All right, we're up to 82% of the participants have entered in there. Anyone else? Try to get in your answers. And I'm going to go ahead in just a minute here and end the poll and see. Let's see. I don't see everyone else's screen, so hopefully you are seeing the results there of the poll. If you are not, I'll pull it up onto my other screen here, and then hopefully you will be. So here we go. Adding value to waste biomass. So people that have woody or non-woody biomass, 41%. So, and all of these ideas, well, if you have it, but maybe you're not interested in the making of biochar, is how is this network going to work for everyone and connecting people and creating this flow of not only information, but also potentially of materials and making a more robust bioeconomy using biochar and all of you, the stakeholders or the actors that are in the network. And then, a lot of people just interested in biochar generally, or the policy behind it, and the potential. We're so happy to have everybody on here that's involved at all. And can scroll down there as well. If you're currently involved with biochar, there we have about half and half. So that shows the potential for the market to be growing, and with our expanding market, how much we can continue to involve more people that are interested. Let me get that out of there, which comes into, if my slides will advance, my next slide here about the biochar market. So just a little snapshot here of where it's expected to go. The CAGR there is for compound annual growth rate. Depends on who has done the market research. It has ranged from about 9% to 19% is that estimation of the growth rate, but certainly it is increasing. There's already a lot of market value with North America being the leading market at the moment. Largest application is farming, and key trends there as a soil amendment for carbon sequestration, gardening and farming is transforming biochar sales. And if you just do a Google search for biochar and shopping, you'll see so many more materials than you would have ever seen in the past. So there's all this growth in different stakeholders, so opportunity for jobs and growth. And we'll see how it goes over the next few years, but hopefully this network in our region will help be able to expand that. And moving into other activities of the network then is another main part of our goal, which is going to be intertwined with other goals as well and other activities, is doing a social network analysis. And so this will help to identify the strong and weak links among existing participants in the Great Lakes region. This is just a diagram of an example from a bioeconomy standpoint of different actors that might be involved. So the larger the circle that you see would be an actor that has more linkages, that is maybe disseminating information to more people, that can help be a connector between folks, versus some of the smaller dots that you might see in there. They might be just connected to one other person. And this will give us an idea, the Great Lakes Biochar Network, a snapshot of what is happening within the region and how we can strengthen it. And what are those actors? Maybe they can help to get more information out and knowing who is doing what. Somebody also asked in the Q&A at first about the Southeast, and if there was another group, for example, there. So we're focusing in the Great Lakes region, but it doesn't mean that we won't find other information out about who else is involved and how we can still pull information and resources from other people of strengthening the greater aspect of biochar in the United States or globally. But with our focus here, and people should be anticipating maybe getting contacted if you are in our region, because your participation will be essential in being able to really get this snapshot. And we'll obviously let people know the results of this analysis, and it can be a means of people being able to communicate more. Of course, no one will have to know who you are, and it won't mean that your information will be shared with anyone else unless you explicitly, consent to that in order to strengthen those connections. But that will be coming up soon. And kind of goal 3 here is embedded within this, the idea of development of extension and outreach products and events. So first, we need to determine the stakeholder needs and interest. And a lot of that is also going to be coming out of those surveys for the social network analysis. So again, the participation, so we know as the network how we can best serve all of the practitioners in biochar. So going into that goal 4 of what types of outreach products and events we will be having. So your needs and interests will guide the topics for fact sheets, article summaries, virtual and in-person events such as field days. So thinking about what do you want to see, and a great opportunity to use the chat function here. If you want to put in some things that you are already thinking about, you can certainly reach out to us later as you are thinking about this and what you think would be most helpful to you as you grow in this biochar network. But if you want to put it in the chat now, that would be great also. So articles and fact sheets, some examples here. This is an existing article that's up through MSU Extension that you can access through our website, and a scientific publication, and the idea that not everyone has access to these types of publications necessarily. So we can help boil down some of that research and information that's getting out there, and get it in the hands of the practitioners and the public that need to know these things in order to inform what they are doing actually out in the field in the real world. And field days, a picture from a field day that we held, this could be in person or virtual. Again, it will depend on people's desires and interest, or in-person field days that are also held virtually simultaneously. It's amazing what we've learned to do in these times. So all these types of events that we might have. And then the last goal is always evaluating the effectiveness of our network activities. So your feedback will help guide the network's products and programs. Part of this is going to be surveys. And it's important to know as we continue to evolve. We will always be assessing the programming. There will actually be an optional survey after this webinar, for example, and the next 2. And all events, so that we can continually improve the effectiveness of our events. It's supposed to be a back and forth, a sharing of information and perspectives to make sure that the network is working for everyone. So how can you get involved in Great Lakes Biochar Network? First, sign up for information on our website and check back as more information comes out there. You can contact me, the Great Lakes Biochar Network Program Coordinator. You see the email there, and you should have already gotten an email from me about the link to today's webinar if you are here. You can suggest topics for the frequently asked questions page that will be coming up on the website. Suggest topics for research briefs and/or extension type articles that you want to know more about. Suggest your preferred types of initial events. Are you interested in those in-person field days, or do webinars work better for you? And where do you want those to be? They could be at different locations throughout the Great Lakes region in order to reach more people, or we're trying to pool people in one area. Participate in more upcoming events, such as the upcoming webinars and other things. Just let us know how you want to be involved. So the future webinars, one of the first ways you can continue to be involved, the production of biochar, November 18th with Dr. Chris Saffron, and economics of biochar production and use with Dr. Raju Pokharel on December 9th. So both of these Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Zoom. hopefully maybe you've already registered for them. You can go back and register for them at the Great Lakes Biochar Network website if you haven't already. If you did find this interesting, know other people that would, encourage other people to sign up for these as well. And with that, thank you for joining today's webinar. Right now, as we said, these are who we were supported by. We thank our sponsors for your support, which has been critical for our ability to create this network. Again, we welcome participants, though, from across the region. Any organization or institution that's interested in biochar, please partner with us to help grow the network. So with that, see what has come up on our Q&A, and I see some things have been coming up on the chat as well.
Been posting some links in the chat, so most of them should be live. You can click on there and go directly to the web page. Or to our social media accounts that Brooke has set up. There's a few questions here in the question and answer. Some of these are broader questions that we won't have time to go into today, but they will be used to inform what goes on to our frequently asked questions page. I see a few from Dave Newman with the Michigan DNR, who is our partner in providing some of these funds from the DNR to support the network. So first question, are certain types of biomass feedstock better than others for producing biochar? And I get this question a lot, and my favorite answer is, it depends. Most biochars now that are used or sold, distributed most widely tend to be wood-based biochars, specifically from softwood species. However, the effects of biochar when it's used as a soil amendment really depend on what biomass it was produced from, how it was produced, what type of soil it was added to, and what your target crop is. So this is why it's so important to have regionally specific research information to help inform both providers and end users of biochar, because it's not just one product. It can be many things that we all talk about as part of this just one broad term, which is biochar, but it's biochar is really biochars, which is very diverse.
Yeah, and we mentioned we have a lot of sandy soils, but there are various soil types, and it's so agriculturally diverse in the Great Lakes region that more information about the specifics of what seems to be working with what, and there's so many different types of biomass that are potentially out there, and knowing what type of biochar you do have if you're trying to purchase it, for example, or if you're going to make it, and what the likely properties are going to be from that will help give a little bit more certainty to people that might be trying to apply biochar.
I think this next question, Charles, I'm wondering if you would be willing to talk about this one. And then the other part of this is, so the question I'll start with is what types of products can be produced from the bio oil byproduct from making biochar? A detailed answer for that, I expect, will be provided by Dr. Chris Safran in next month's webinar. I'm not sure, Charles, if you're still with us, if you want to talk a little bit more about the bio oil products.
Yeah, Jessica, I think I'm going to defer to Dr. Safran. He'll have a more thorough answer than I'm able to give.
Okay, great, thank you. So
that just means you have to come to the next webinar. All right, the next question there, are there any current commercial biochar producers in Michigan? So that's part of knowing how many more there might be. We're aware of a few. National Carbon Technologies in particular is based out of Minnesota, but they have one of the largest biochar production facilities in North America, I believe, that is located in the Upper Peninsula in Gwinn, Michigan. And finding out who else are producers, we're not endorsing any one biochar of another, but trying to get that information out to people, because I think that has been a lacking of, if I want to use biochar, where can I be accessing that? So there are some producers, and that type of information will be coming out on the website as well.
So if you are a biochar producer, or you work with somebody who is a biochar producer, feel free to go ahead and put that in the chat. We'll get a better idea of who all the different producers are and their scales through the social network analysis. And again, our goal is, if for those who consent to be listed We would provide more like a regional directory of biochar producers or biomass suppliers, things like that. What we want to be careful about is our network endorsing a specific product without research that really clearly backs up specific applications for that material. But as far as connecting partners who can explore its potential uses, that's really what our network is eager to do. Next question says, can sawmill bark byproducts and timber harvest residues, such as ground up tree limbs and bark, be used to produce useful biochar? And are there types of biomass that are unsuitable? Again, that will be a great question for Dr. Safran to address in next webinar. In general, the type of biomass that you use to produce biochar does influence the biochar characteristics. If your biomass is dirty, such as has a lot of soil contaminating with it, that can affect the mineral content of your biochar and may affect your industrial process also. But as far as the variety of types of biomass that have been explored to produce what will be called biochar, or what the producers will call biochar, has ranged from everything from poultry litter to waste wood biomass, including discarded pallets that are no longer used, to forestry residue, to crop residue. And all of these things are potential uses. Again, we need more information about what the characteristics of the biochars are that are produced from each of these materials and how they influence soil or environmental processes or the industrial processes that they're used in, if they're used as components of packaging or industrial materials.
Absolutely. And a last question that we have there in the Q&A is, in a prior webinar, it was stated that the tonnage of biochar needed to improve productivity was so high that the cost of the biochar would exceed the cost of buying top cash crop land. Has anything changed? I would say that is in part going to be explored in the last webinar of this series about some of the economics. But the economics have been shifting as biochar has become more popular and there are more producers. There's certainly a supply and demand aspect. It is not my area of expertise to exactly speak on, but in general, the prices have come down, and the more that we do create these connections of people that have biomass that they want converted and avenues for them to get it to the manufacturers, the producers of biochar, and greater distribution channels, I would expect that the prices can come down. And there's such a variety that you see in the research in terms of how much tonnage, and small amounts can still have a big positive effect, especially when you consider that biochar stays around in the soil, that it's not something that you would necessarily have to keep applying in such large amounts year after year, or small amounts year after year can accumulate to a large amount eventually. So, the economics are certainly a big aspect for a lot of people. And I think that has been continuing to shift, and we will see how that does continue to shift in the coming years.
In the chat, we have a response from Chris Safran, who's our next month's webinar speaker. He's addressing the question about bio-oil products. So I'll read his response. He says a number of products can be made from bio-oil. First, it can be upgraded into liquid fuels. Second, bio-oil can be used as a flavoring agent, such as smoky flavor. A number of other molecules can also be isolated, as bio-oil is a complex mixture. I'll provide more information during the next webinar.
So do stay tuned. All right, with that, we have pretty much come to the end of the hour. If you do have other questions, still go ahead and get those to us. You can email me, as it has been said, at glbn@msu.edu. That can be with some of these questions that can end up being addressed either in the upcoming webinars if they fit under those topics, or also on the website under the frequently asked questions. But we appreciate everyone's participation and coming to the webinar today. I hope you are able to make it to the next one. If you enjoyed this, tell others that are interested. They can watch the recording and come to the following ones and other future events that we will be holding. So stay tuned, follow along on the website and on social media. And we look forward to growing this network with you. All right. And with that, unless anyone has anything else, Jessica, any other closing words, or we will end the webinar here and look forward to seeing everyone the next time.
I think that this is a great place to wrap it up. Appreciate everybody joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next webinar.
All right. We'll see you November 18th. Take care.